You are born into a world that is ending and beginning at the same time. It is the year 1095. Pope Urban II has just delivered a sermon at the Council of Clermont that will reshape the next 2 centuries of history. He has called upon the Christian knights of Europe to take up arms and march to Jerusalem, to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule, to defend the pilgrims who travel there and are robbed and murdered on the roads, to earn through sacred violence the remission of all their sins. The crowd at Clermont responds with a single voice. Deus vult. God wills it. You are a minor French nobleman, third son of a lord with modest lands in Burgundy. In the inheritance structure of medieval Europe, third sons inherit almost nothing. The estate goes to the first son, the second son gets something, the third son gets a horse, a sword, and the expectation that he will find his own way. The church is one option. The tournament circuit is another. War is the third. God has just announced a war, and God is offering something no earthly lord can match. Salvation itself. Your sins, the priest tells you, all of them, wiped clean in exchange for taking the cross. You take the cross. You have no idea what you're walking into. Nobody does. The First Crusade is improvised, chaotic, driven more by faith and violence and hunger than by any coherent military strategy. You march for 2 years. You watch tens of thousands of people die of disease, starvation, and combat. You see things that the sermons back in Burgundy did not prepare you for. You see things that you will spend the rest of your life trying to understand. In 1099, Jerusalem falls to the crusader forces. The massacre that follows is something the chroniclers who were there describe with a mixture of horror and theological justification that tells you everything about the world you live in. You survive. You are 26 years old. You are standing in the city of Jerusalem and you have nowhere to go. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar, are founded in 1119 by a French knight named Hugues de Payens and 8 companions. The idea is practical before it is mystical. Thousands of pilgrims travel to Jerusalem every year and the roads are murderous. Bandits, hostile forces. A journey of thousands of miles through terrain that has no safe passage for unarmed civilians. De Payens proposes a permanent armed force. Monks who are also warriors, bound by religious vows, existing for the sole purpose of protecting the pilgrims on the road. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem gives them quarters on the Temple Mount, in the ruins of what may have been Solomon's temple. The name comes from this. You join in the early years. The organization is still small, fewer than 100 members. The vows are strict. Poverty, chastity, obedience. You own nothing personally. Everything you have belongs to the order. You sleep in a dormitory with other brothers. You eat simple food in silence while scripture is read aloud. You pray at fixed hours through the day and night regardless of what else is happening. You train in arms every day because the prayer and the sword are equally your purpose. The initiation is a ceremony that impresses upon you the absolute finality of the commitment. You kneel before the master. You surrender your personal name symbolically. You are brother now, a member of a body, not an individual. You take the vows in a language older than you are before men who will hold you to them for the rest of your life. You feel in that moment something that is genuinely difficult to describe. Not holiness exactly. Something more like alignment. Like the disparate things you have been. The third son, the veteran, the man who watched Jerusalem fall and did not know what to do next, have found a shape they fit. You are a Templar now. You belong to something larger than yourself. In the year 1120, with the roads to Jerusalem still running with blood, that is not a small thing. The distinction between knight brothers and sergeant brothers is rigid and important. Knight brothers are of noble birth. They wear the white mantle with the red cross that becomes the most recognized symbol of the order. They fight on horseback. They are, in the hierarchy of medieval warfare, the heavy cavalry, the most lethal military technology of the age. Sergeant brothers come from lower social ranks. They wear a black or brown mantle. They perform a range of functions: squires, craftsmen, administrators, light cavalry. The organization cannot function on knights alone, and the sergeants are the machinery that keeps it running. You are a sergeant. You will never wear the white mantle. This is simply a fact of birth, not a reflection of your worth or your commitment. Though the distinction between those two things is not always easy to maintain in an organization where the white mantle rides at the front and the black mantle supports from behind. Your role is logistics, supply chains, the movement of goods and men and animals across the vast distances of the crusader territories. This is unglamorous work, but it teaches you something the knights on horseback don't always know. Wars are won by logistics before they are won by combat. An army that cannot eat cannot fight. A fortress that runs out of water falls regardless of the courage of its defenders. You become very good at this. You learn the roads, the ports, the suppliers, the rates of spoilage on different provisions at different temperatures. You build relationships with merchants in the port cities, Acre, Tyre, Jaffa, that give the order pricing advantages that translate directly into military capacity. You also begin to understand the order's finances. Because here is the thing about an organization of warrior monks who have taken vows of personal poverty, but collectively need to fund one of the most expensive military operations in history. Someone has to manage the money. And the management of money at this scale in the 12th century requires innovation that the world doesn't have vocabulary for yet. You are watching the invention of banking. From the inside. Without knowing, that's what you're watching. It takes a different kind of war to understand what the white mantle actually costs. You are present at the Battle of the Horns of Hattin in 1187. Saladin has unified the Muslim forces of Syria and Egypt, and he has drawn the Crusader army into the field in conditions of his choosing. A waterless plateau in high summer, the army surrounded, the heat a weapon as lethal as any sword. The Templars fight until there is nothing left to fight with. This is not a metaphor. The rule of the order prohibits retreat except under specific conditions. A Templar who retreats without authorization faces loss of his mantle. In practice, this means the knights fight past the point that military logic would demand withdrawal. The battle is a catastrophe. The Crusader army is destroyed. Jerusalem falls to Saladin 3 months later. The military purpose for which the order was founded, protecting the Christian presence in the Holy Land, has effectively failed. What happens to captured Templars after Hatton tells you everything about how the order is perceived by its enemies? Saladin executes every Templar prisoner, not the secular knights who are ransomed in the normal way. The Templars specifically, because Templars don't surrender in the normal way and don't negotiate in the normal way, and can't be absorbed into the normal medieval system of capture and ransom. They are too dangerous to keep, too committed to release. The only option is execution. You survive Hatton because you were with a resupply column 3 miles from the battle when it turned. You listen to the survivors describe it for days afterward. You notice that none of them talk about God's will. They talk about water, about the heat, about the decision to march in those conditions. You keep that observation to yourself, but you don't forget it. The Templars rebuild after Hatton the way organizations built on absolute commitment always rebuild. Not by questioning the purpose, but by increasing the intensity of the dedication to it. You rise to command a preceptory, a Templar house, administrative center, military base, financial operation. You oversee 30 brothers, 100 servants and workers, farms and workshops that produce the income that funds the military operations in the East. The financial operation is the thing that you find yourself thinking about most. The Templar banking system has evolved over the previous century into something extraordinary. A pilgrim in France can deposit money with a Templar house, receive a coded letter of credit, travel to Jerusalem, and withdraw funds from a Templar house there without carrying currency across the bandit roads. This is, in the 12th century, a revolution in how money moves. It is also extraordinarily profitable. The order has become one of the largest financial institutions in Europe. Kings borrow from Templars. The French crown is deeply in debt to the order. The wealth is theoretically collective. No individual Templar owns anything. But the institution's wealth is staggering. You manage accounts. You correspond with preceptories across Europe. You negotiate with merchants and nobility. You are, in the language the modern world would use, a banker, and a general simultaneously. Bound by vows of poverty, managing assets of almost incomprehensible scale. The contradiction is not lost on you. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, living in dormitories and eating in silence, are one of the richest institutions in the world. You have thought about this long enough to find the theological argument for it. Individual poverty in service of collective purpose? And you have thought about it long enough to see where the argument develops cracks under pressure. You keep managing the accounts, the cracks are not your problem, not yet. In October 1307, King Philip IV of France orders the simultaneous arrest of every Templar in France. The charges are heresy, apostasy, obscene initiation rituals, worship of an idol called Baphomet, spitting on the cross. You know these charges are fabricated. You have been a Templar for 30 years. You know what the initiation ceremony contains and what it does not contain. You know that the King of France owes the order an enormous sum that will be conveniently cancelled by dissolution. You know that Philip has been trying to get papal authorization to dissolve the order for years. You know that the Inquisition operates under torture, and that under torture men will confess to anything. You know all of this, and it makes no difference. The arrests happen so fast and so completely that the order cannot respond. 2,000 Templars in France seized in a single day. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, arrested along with the senior leadership. The papal authorization, extracted from a compromised Pope Clement V, who owes his position to Philip's influence, follows within weeks. You are arrested at your preceptory on the morning of the 13th of October. The soldiers come before dawn. There are more of them than is necessary for 30 brothers. This is the point. The display of overwhelming force is the message. The interrogation takes place over several weeks. You do not confess to the fabricated charges. Some of your brothers do. You understand why. The methods the Inquisition uses are not subtle. You hold through methods that you would not describe in detail even now, even to yourself, if the memory were not already burned in permanently. You are ultimately convicted on the basis of testimony extracted from others. The sentence is life imprisonment. In 1314, Jacques de Molay is burned at the stake in Paris. He recants his confession in the moments before the fire is lit and dies proclaiming the innocence of the order. You are still in prison. You hear about it from a guard who considers it notable enough to mention. You die in a prison cell in France. The year is sometime in the 1320s. The exact date is not recorded because you are not a person the record keepers consider worth recording anymore. The order that gave you your purpose and your name, that turned a landless third son into something with shape and meaning, has been formally dissolved by papal decree. Its assets, the enormous accumulation of 2 centuries of banking and crusading, have been distributed between the French crown and the Hospitallers, another military order. The debt the French crown owed has been cancelled. Philip IV got what he came for. The Holy Land is gone. Jerusalem has been in Muslim hands since 1244. The crusading enterprise, the purpose for which Hugues de Payan and 8 companions took their vows on the Temple Mount 200 years ago, is functionally over. What you think about in the cell is not the theology. It is smaller than that. The pilgrim routes you helped protect in your first years when the order was small, and the idea was simple. Armed monks on dangerous roads, standing between unarmed travelers and the people who wanted to hurt them. That was the thing. Before the banking and the politics and the debt and the king's soldiers at dawn. That was the thing you said yes to. You think about Deus Vult, the crowd at Clermont that started all of this, the certainty of it, the single voice. You wonder what the crowd at Clermont would think of where it all ended up. You suspect they would recognize it. Certainty, directed with enough force, tends to arrive at the same place. The question is only how long the journey takes and how many people are in the cell at the end of it. That's a wrap for today. If this one hit different, drop a comment and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next one.